Hi guys, and welcome to my webinar on the 5 Ps of highly successful personal trainers. I have to say I've been super excited about this, and I've been looking forward to doing this one for quite a while now. And of course, in reference to the book launch, obviously I wanted to do this webinar so it gives you a really clear understanding of where I'm at with my program and the book, and it gives you a sound understanding of where I'm coming from regarding PTs, how they can improve themselves, develop themselves, and ultimately obviously become a successful personal trainer. So I wanted to kick the webinar off by talking about defining success. Well, of course, I've talked about my 5 Ps, which you'll get in a second, but what do you or us or we, how do we define success? Because success then comes in many forms, and for some people, for some PTs, there are priorities that are completely different to other people. You know, for example, obviously, if you are main driven, there are plenty of PTs out there that are happy to do, 40 contact hours a week. And yes, they're working the bum off, but they make a heap of cash from it, which is, I suppose, one of the benefits of the industry that we work in. If you're prepared to work hard, thanks to obviously being a sole trader and a reasonably high hourly rate comparatively to most other industries, we have the potential there. You know, industry respect or reputation, right, is another key aspect of success. How are you viewed in not only the public eye, but your common client or your common work colleague, being other PTs. Changing people's lives, I would like to think that would be closer to the heart of the matter. Obviously, having a waiting list, again, it's just an attribute or a recognition of being successful. Or is it just through our inspiration of our own training? Do you train like a semi-professional athlete? And if you were to pit yourself against one, you'd probably do okay. So I would like to think there's a combination of all those things. The only difference here, of course, that some PTs would have a higher focus on some than others. However, if we had to summarize or to, I suppose, create some clarity around it, I would hope that for the most part, and certainly from PTs that I talk to, that's certainly the case, that we obviously have a strong passion for all things that is health, fitness and wellness related, whether that's nutrition, movement, mental health, the likes of. Then of course what we want to do is support people through their journey to improve the quality of their life. And that's, in a nutshell, I think the crux of what we do and why we do it. Now, of course, the flip side, which I've bluntly put here in the webinar, is, or did we get into industry because we thought we could earn a heap of money? And the reason why I put this is simply because of a disturbing, I suppose, trend in the industry with, dare I say it, next generation coming through, where they're obviously wanting, there's more instant gratification coming through in the industry and the generation. And I guess I want to put a big red flag out there, or warning that, if you are looking to earn a heap of money, or you've got a really strong entrepreneurial, I suppose, gene in you, then the fitness industry probably isn't the best direction for that, not initially. Right? If you looked at the industry 10, 12 years ago, it was like any other sort of trade industry where you do your apprenticeship, you do your time, you learn your craft, right? And then you slowly work up your ranks until you get to a point where you've had enough success where you can then leverage off that. So of course, as a PT, my number one tip for a lot of PTs coming through is lose this concept of a nice high hourly rate, or the fact that you can try and build an empire around your personal training business. Learn the craft first, learn how to move and the ins and outs of it entirely. And when you get your business to a point where you're comfortable and you have a very consistent stream of clients, then look to leverage it. Then bring in the whole entrepreneurial spirit into it and look to prioritize what you do. Right? If you're really keen on the money side, choose another industry because it just doesn't work that well in the fitness one. Anyway, that's my rant over about that. So of course, we talked about why we get into the industry. Well, I thought I'd share you a bit about me and a bit of my history. Now, movement has been in my life since I can walk, and it's been a strong part of it ever since. Movement, I obviously get a huge amount of satisfaction from, whether that is doing it myself in a competitive environment, or even just a day-to-day, teaching of it, coaching of it, or even learning more about it. And I don't think it's going to change much. As long as I'm breathing, I'm going to be moving in either myself in some capacity or teaching in some capacity. Now, of course, up through the years, obviously I've gone primarily through the sporting context with my track and field days, rugby union, and then of course I've entered into the educational space and really quite enjoy giving back to the community what I've picked up over the years from God knows how many coaches in various settings. So this particular why, which I have now on my website, I'm actually quite pleased with, and it's taken me a long time to sort of nut out my why and the essence of it. So I've got here, movement is a gift of life. Everything we do teaches fitness professionals, being you guys, how to inspire people, right? So they too can fall in love with movement. Obviously our clients, generally speaking, fall out of love with movement. They don't rate it so highly in their life, and it's our job to inspire them to fall in love with it again. And you know, obviously I worked for a number of years as a PT, and I thought, well, you know, how can we bottle this information and get it out there so that I know the quality of service that's going out there will affect more and more people. Well, and that's obviously through education and my products. So that's me. Now, in reference to, I suppose, my training methodologies and my principles and how I present myself, I'm very, very upfront, very honest, and I tell it as it is. All right, so you're not going to get a lot of gimmicks or smoky clouds in front of me. So what you see is what you get. I teach the fundamentals of human movement across many training disciplines. Right? And I'm more interested in PTs or the ability to be able to teach PTs how to think for themselves. Right? So they form their own opinions on common training principles and methodologies. You know, one thing I've really struggled with in the education sector as I've got into it, and even to be honest, while I've done courses myself as a PT as well, is the guruism, as I'll call it, that goes with a lot of educators across the world in the fitness industry. And that is that they teach PTs their system, their way of training, and there's this portrayalment that it's the best or only training system you're going to need. And whether that's a marketing ploy or otherwise, it's not really something that I've really been appreciative of. Right? So is it a cult-like training system, as I like to say? No, it's not whatsoever. Is there random technical jargon where the only people who understand what you're talking about is those who've done your course? There's none of that as well. Right? My program revolves around high quality information that is tried and tested across the allied health industry. So if you walk into any physio clinic, osteo clinic, or whatever, they'll understand what you're talking about. Right? Because it's been done, tried and tested for years and years and years. They understand the information, they know the information. Right? As I say, so it's all around the fundamentals. So the short of it is I teach exercise professionals how to become successful by becoming exceptional movement therapists, as I like to say. You know, 95% of what we do, outside of maybe counseling our clients, is teach them how to move. They come to us, we train them. And yes, their outside goals are obviously around lean muscle mass gain or body fat percentages coming down, et cetera, but we do that via movement. Right? So I teach you to become an exceptional movement therapist. Right? And you combine that with sound business systems, right? And you're onto a winner. If you're great at what you do, you don't need amazing sales techniques, gimmicks, or hype. As simple as that. So anyway, there's me in a nutshell and what I do. And obviously I've based it around 5Ps to help to systemize it and to make it a bit easier for PTs to understand. But as I say, the stuff within these 5Ps isn't huge rocket science. It's just extremely effective and common practice. So if we get into it, obviously, quickly brush over that one, sorry. 5Ps, obviously profit goes without saying. That's the oddball in the 5. The rest of the last 4 are movement based. But I obviously appreciate that profit as a sole trader or a business owner or business skills is extremely important. And it's something that we as PTs lack in, simply because it's not what we care that most about. You know, we love movement, generally speaking, and we're far interested in how to, you know, do a front lever or teach people how to squat properly than learn how to run a business effectively. But if you want a long career as a fitness professional or exercise professional, then we need it. And it's something that I wish I had as I was coming through as well. So, profit. Now, we're going to run through each of these 5s, obviously, throughout this webinar, and I will try not to skim. I will try and definitely give you some tips and tricks to leave with, but it really is just an overview to give you some clarity about what I do. So I talked earlier about my why. So why is a why important? And how deep does your why run? And that's obviously in reference to, I've got here an apple tree. Your why is the roots. It's the foundation of what you do. Your how, of course, is the training. And the what is your product. So this is obviously an analogy that business owners use as well. And the reason why I wanted to share it with you is because so many people, and myself included for so many years, don't share the why. People buy into people. And if they don't know why you do what you do, then they're never going to buy into it. Right? I was talking to Michelle, and you're going to watch the interview today. You know, she talks a lot about passion as being the #1 quality that gym owners or personal training managers ask for when looking for a PT to hire or employ. Now, she's a PT recruitment company, so she deals primarily with gym owners. And of course, the first question she asks for is, what are you looking for in a PT? So I can go and look at my database and find one for you. And more times than not, this is what they come back with. And the reason why I put it up there, because that feeds directly into your why. If you come into the industry and it's just a bit of, oh, well, I didn't really know what I want to do with myself, but I really like training, so I might give it a go as a PT. Well, you know, I won't say you're hard doomed before you start, but you sort of are. Right? You need to have a strong passion. You need to have a heap of emotion behind what you do and why you do it. And of course, once you've got that why sorted and you've done a bit of soul searching, it's really easy to transfer into a niche. And I talk about a niche in my program a fair bit, simply because us as PTs are awful at doing that and having some form of specialty or a direction with what we want to do with our business. And I get it that when you first come into the industry that, you know, you go, well, I don't really know a heap of information. I know how to squat, lunge, push, pull, but I don't think I have enough tangible skills to be able to say I'm a boxing specialist or, you know, John's personal training specializing in sports conditioning. I appreciate that, but at the same time, there's no reason why you can't brand yourself in a certain direction. Right? You don't need to have specialist skills when you first come out to get your branding right around what you want to do. Body transformations, for example. I want to work with middle-aged people that have got 15 kilos too much than they should, and I specialize in making it happen. So you don't need specialist skills to be able to do that. But what you are telling the universe is that, as I said, I want to work with a certain type of people. They bring certain personality types and characteristics. That, of course, attracts them to your business, and you're happy because you're working with people that you love working with. And that's basically in a nutshell what I've got here on the slide. Gives your business some focus and direction. Right? Allows you to work with a particular type of people that you want to work with. And the key point down the bottom there is it pre-sells you. Right? It puts you in a position where you obviously are seen as a, I'll say the word, specialist in a particular field, even though you might be a novice. Right? The uniform that you wear automatically says you're a professional in what you do. Right? And there's a heap of buy-in with your client just from that alone. And if you obviously get them through the door, then obviously your job is then to maintain them and hang on to them. But it pre-sells them. So you don't have to sell as hard or try and convince them that you're great at transformations when your business says John's 12-week transformations. And that's exactly what they want. Okay, so once you have your product and your brand, so you know who your market is, who you want to work with, then of course you just need a system to get them, right? Nurture them, right? And then of course convert them. And obviously once you have them in your, as an ongoing client, how do you nurture them again and keep them happy? And then to finish with that, how do you make sure or manage that what you're doing is working? So your analytics, how do you analyze whether or not whatever processes you're putting in place is actually effective? So that's what I'm going to go through as quickly as possible in your next 7 steps. How do we generate leads? That's the obvious one. Right? We obviously talk about, if you're in a corporate club, it's not so important because you pay good money in a rental club for their sales team to bring people to the gym. And then all you have to do is be present, right? Be professional, communicate well, and make sure that you're obviously bringing your A game so that they fall in love with what you do. If you're outdoors, then you're going to work a lot harder, of course. Right? Sales is just a numbers game. Right? So the more people in your funnel, and we're going to talk a lot about this funnel. So we talked about a marketing funnel, which you've probably heard about before. Well, this system is obviously built around that. Right? So that when those leads dry up, if you're in a corporate club, for example, you don't have to rely on them. There's now, 3 trainers underneath you, and they're getting all those leads. Well, this is where your funnel becomes extremely important. Right? So sales is just a numbers game. The more people in your funnel means the greater number of sales. Now, how do we get those people into our funnel? Of course, for the most part these days, we're talking about social media. And we could do, we could do an 8-hour webinar just on social media and marketing in itself. And it's so dynamic. It's evolving so quickly. It's not funny. But that is probably the easiest place to go to expose yourself to a massive number of people. Which means, of course, as I said, it's a numbers game. You get more people in your funnel. Now, when we talk about social media and using them as a platform, make sure you have a clear focus for each platform. So for example, if you're on Instagram, obviously you're limited by video sizes. So it's more of just a brand awareness platform. Whereas Facebook, of course, you can provide really quality information. You can have private Facebook pages up. You can have obviously lengthy videos. You can put up, upload PDFs and documents and whatever. So it's a great platform to be able to provide quality content to people. And of course, ensure your messages are clear when posting content on social media. It's my number one point there. It has to be quality and it has to be clear. Right? So cast the net wide. And by that, I mean, don't make your, initially, don't make your point too narrow. So be a broad stroke of information. And then that obviously will capture a lot of people. And within those people, they'll spread the word for you about what you do. Oh, I've got a friend that's after body transformations, or he's pretty keen on the idea. I might forward this page or share this page onto their wall, for example. How do you capture new leads? So you need to create a list. Right, this is obviously when we talk about a database. This is what we're talking about. And how do you create it? Of course, I talked in the previous slide about quality content. That has to happen. You have to have quality information. If the carrot's not big, they just won't bite. So don't be afraid to give away some of your best information. In fact, I was having a conversation with a good friend of mine not so long ago, and we were talking about, you know, education side for PTs, and so many of, you know, again, I'll use the word gurus out there, give away all their best stuff. They throw it out there on the social media channels, YouTube, whatever, right? Because it grabs PTs, it grabs them and says, wow, this is amazing. Yep, I want to sign up and do your course. Right? Now, in the case of PT, well, of course, give them some of your best tips for body transformation, if that's where you're going with it. Right? So it's top 5 articles, webinars, podcasts, interviews, ebooks. You can even go to Google 100 best giveaways for social media marketing, and you'll get a huge list of whatever you can do. All of which, of course, need an opt-in, because the whole idea of a list is we capture details so that we can continue to nurture them. So use a CRM software of some sort. So MailChimp is cheap. AdWeber is also good. Zoho, if you want to pay a little bit more and get obviously additional services to that. Deliver exclusive content. All right. So from that perspective, once you've captured them, or even to capture them, right, that carrot can be in the form of private information or exclusive information. They love it. And I've got in bold down the bottom there, of course. Remember, you're not trying to sell to them at this point. You're not trying to gain a paying client. All you're trying to do is hook them with the fantastic value that you deliver. Right, so they see, wow, this guy's quite interesting. I might have just keep an eye on him, see what other stuff he can present. And over time, you're layering them with more and more and more fantastic stuff, and you're going to get huge buy-in. So when they're in the looking zone, they go, yep, you know what? John's transformation is for me, because the stuff that he's given me so far is fantastic. I can really see true value, and I like what he does. And that's what I mean by nurture your leads. That's what literally this is. So you're trying to gain that know, like, trust from these leads. Right? The more you give away, the more you get in return. And that's what I was saying. Just keep, I don't want to use the word bombard by any means. You know, less is more, assuming the quality of the content is high. Weekly newsletters, blogs, training tips, templates, workouts of the week, you name it. Again, just get creative, brainstorm. The more amazing the content that is put in front of them, the greater the rapport you're going to build with them. And then, of course, it's a case of we've got them in our system, they're on our database. How do we then, of course, let them know what we do? We also need to let them know that, yes, okay, we give away all this great content, but we also have a service that you can buy into. Right, so tell people how you can help them, i.e. all the softwares that offer, services that you offer, sorry. Right, use your, again, your newsletter, your social media platforms to inform them, the people in your funnel. This is where you do be specific about your services. So at the start, the very first step, I talked about keeping it broad, casting a wide net. Well, this is now we drive down into your niche, and the services obviously that you provide are very specific. And please do, if there's nothing you take more from this, it's ensure that you're solving their problems. When you create your products, in fact, so this point here, technically, and we go through this in my program, you need to go back several steps and work out what their problems are to start with. And remember, it's their problems, not yours. So for example, client walks in, wants to lose 10 kilos, feel better so they can keep up with their kids. Great, okay? That's their problems. Problems that you see, all right, kyphotic, all right, shoulder impingements and pain, knees are underactive or aren't stable, and there's a heap of coordination, movement, kinesthetic problems with the way they move. Right? Now you're not pitching that. You obviously have to try and pitch on their problems. So the problems that they perceive they have. Right? And we combine that with the problems that we know they have. But when we're selling or when we're trying to get it out there, our services, we pitch on their problems. So again, when we talk about knowing your niche, well, know your niche inside out. So if you want to work with mums that are, 35 to 50, know where their headspace is at, know what their problems are, what they perceive as their problems, so that when you use taglines and your call to actions, etc., all right, you're hitting the nail on the head and you grab them. You go, wow, yeah, that's me. If you're solving that problem, I want it. Okay, and that's my final point there. Have a clear call to action. All right, what do you want them to do? So give them your service. What's the next step? There's always the next step in whatever you do from a marketing perspective. Even something as simple as a blog. I've written a blog about hamstring strength. Right, on the end of that, if you want to know more about how to, the top exercises to train your hamstrings, click here to go to my YouTube channel where I have a playlist of hamstring exercises, etc., etc. Right, that's critical. You need that call to action. If you don't give them a call to action, they will not move on what you're trying to sell. Okay, so they've come through the funnel, you've given them a call to action, they've bitten on it, and of course, you've got yourself a genuine lead coming in for a comp session. So then, of course, what is your sales process? So, and this is where we as PTs are we start to get familiar with these steps. These next couple of steps, they should be reasonably familiar because this is what we typically do in a gym setting in particular, or whenever we get a comp session. Right? All I'm doing now is trying to create some clarity around what we already know and what we already do. So once you meet face-to-face with a lead, what do you do? That's the opening question. Do you play 20 questions? And of course, by that, I mean, just ask them. How's your day? Where do you work? How many kids do you have? Where are you from? Etc., etc., etc. And based on playing 20 questions, of course, there are two key elements of this that you need to keep in mind. You're asking the question, why and what else? And the reason why those two words are critical, you can ask any salesperson and they'll say exactly the same thing. Right? By asking why or what else, you go down a layer. You're getting deeper and deeper and deeper to trying to understand the real reasons why they're here. They want to lose 10 kilos, great. Why? Oh, because I'm not feeling great. Why? Oh, it's because I've got my sister's wedding coming up and you know what, I can't fit in my wedding dress or my bridesmaid dress or whatever. Okay, now we're getting closer to the truth of the issue, the crux of the issue. Right, so when you're going through that comp session, keep asking. 70-30 rule, 70% they're talking, 30% you're talking. And all you're pretty much doing is acting as a soundboard. I've got their comp sessions with X Factor. Now, I appreciate this doesn't obviously apply to all clients because all clients are going to have different requirements and needs. However, for that typical common client that walks in that you're after, have a session that you know is going to grab them and just repeat it. Do it with every single lead that you have. All right? So by X factor, I mean wow factor. It's something that corporate clubs use a lot as that X factor or that wow factor. If your sessions don't have it on that initial contact, right, first impressions last. If this is a good indication of what our training session is going to be like, then cool, I want it. Right? And the better you, if you keep doing a similar session or the same session, right, the better you get at running it. So you become really clear and confident, and it just runs cleanly, right? It acts as a fantastic representation of the service that you want them to obviously experience. You've done the session, and of course you've got the crux of it, which is obviously the sales. And although, again, a little bit like social media, you could run a 8-hour webinar on just the pitch in itself. And I go into it in more detail in my book, so have a good read of it. But for the point of this slide, I want to say keep the presentation clean. Do not bombard them with too many options. So keep it simple, maximum 3, as in train with me once, twice, 3 times a week on the preferred plan that you want to offer as a service, 1 hour session, half hour, 45s, whatever it may be. Small group, just very much dependent. And refer back to the underlying reason. Go back to why they're here. Right? When you came in here, you filled out a questionnaire form, and you mentioned that your need to or desire to reach your goal was an 8 out of 10. Right. Well, can you see how my service is going to help you to obviously obtain the goal that you want? 8 out of 10 is obviously quite a high number. Right? So you can't balk off that. You know, once they've said it, they've stated it, it's really important to them. Well, hello. All right, and of course, my final point here is refer back to the underlying reason. Refer back to, oh, well, actually, my sister's getting married and I can't send them a dress. That's the crux of where my client, your lead's emotion's at. Yes, they want to lose weight, but it's that underlying value or that reason, right, that will just get them across the line. It would make it so much easier to sell because you have appreciated what it was, and they have obviously recognized that you listened, which is also half of it. All right, and so the next point I wanted to make was around this point, step here reads, obviously, how do you deliver your sessions? But what I'm trying to say here is, how do you maintain a high retention rate? That's basically what I'm talking about here. Okay. And obviously in the book, I talk about, are you a personal trainer? So your ability to relate to people, right, and have your personality mold or suit that of the individuals that you're working with is critical. That's my first point. Right? If you are bland, and we know this, if you don't have any personality, then they're not going to really appreciate your time or being in your space. Right? That's half of it. The second half of it is we're going to have multiple personality types in our club or in our gym or business environment. So we need to be able to obviously communicate and relay what they want to hear and talk to them on a level that they're going to appreciate. You know, do they have a ridiculous amount of energy, or are they a little bit flat? You know, so when you come in, if they're a little bit flat, or sorry, if they're high energy and you are flat, they're not going to really feel the love for you. They're not going to really appreciate and enjoy your space because they'll probably feel like, well, I'm actually feel like I'm providing all the energy. All right? So that's a classic example. Body language is a big part of that as well. When it comes to retention in general, I talk about offering obviously a service that is unexpected. Right? So at the point of sale, hide 10% of your service. Right? Don't tell them that when they reach a certain milestone, you get this, and another milestone, you get this, another milestone, you get this. Right? What that does is this helps to ensure client satisfaction with perceived value adds. Right? So that when the client gets to that point, it obviously has this perception that you've gone above and beyond. Right? And it keeps their appreciation for what you do high. So when they've been with you for 3, 6 months, whatever it may be, right, there isn't this staleness around what we do because you're always surprising them with value adds, services that you already knew was coming, but they didn't. Right? Plays a big part in that retention rate. So ideas, of course, some simple ideas, weekly motivational texts. You know, as lame as it sort of sounds, certificates at completion. But you might give them a certificate with what I've got there, a 30-minute free massage voucher. which is often given away as lead generations by the therapist anyway. So again, it doesn't really cost you much, or at the very least, if you're buying a heap of them, they'll give it to you at a cheap rate. Monthly articles, so access to a private Facebook forum or page, a free weekly yoga session or stretching session that all of your clients can go to. Right? So how are you delivering your service, your sessions on an ongoing perspective, from an ongoing perspective? And then lastly, regarding the steps, of course, is how do you monitor the previous 6 steps? We need to make sure that what we're doing is working. So what are your key performance indicators for success? I have X number of leads coming through a week. I'm converting 50% of them, and I have kept my session numbers at 20 hours a week, which is what I wanted to maintain. They're meeting your KPIs. How do you do that? So the previous step was around client satisfaction and that retention rate. Well, surveys, ask them. You can either do it formally or informally by literally talking to your clients. Right? Google Analytics around your social media stuff. So back end, where are your clients coming? Where are your leads? Sorry, your viewers from your website coming from? Is it your Facebook pages? Is it Instagram? Is it et cetera, et cetera? Right? What are your unique numbers, visit numbers? If you don't have many unique numbers, then chances are, or visitors, chances are whatever you're doing is not working. How many people actually opened your ebook that you gave away? Right? How do leads hear about you? Obviously, we do that for services, God knows how many times a week. Oh, how did you hear about us? Right? Just want to know, so I know which channels I'm working with works. Again, not rocket science, just got to do it. Right, so management of the previous 6 steps is a critical part to give you feedback. Right? Just don't stab in the dark. There's nothing worse than just doing a heap of stuff and then going, oh, I hope it works, but having no perception of what's success and what's not. Right? I did it for years and years and years, and you just sort of hope that whatever you do works right. Well, put some strategies in place to monitor and manage. All right, and that comes to a close the profit section. So just to review, obviously these 7 steps is around finding, converting, and retaining clients. Step 1 was all about how do you find leads, to which forums, which obviously tools are you using to find them. All right? How do you get them onto your list? What carrots do you have? All right? Remember, big carrots, high quality information. How do you get them excited about what you do or who you are or your brand? So once they're in the system, i.e. your newsletters, tell them about an amazing service that you have. Then we talked about once they're actually in the door. So once they've actually come to you for a comp, how do you present your service and your offer? How do you close your sales? Number 6 was about the retention. How do you continue to delight and surprise on an ongoing basis? If you do not do that, then your retention rate will be poor. Right? How do you monitor your results? Well, of course, we just discussed that. And as I sort of mentioned just in that last slide as well, document each of these steps into a process and plan to create clarity, direction, and accountability. All right? So just don't write on a piece of paper for number 1, how do I find leads? Post on Facebook. Right? What is your strategy? What's going out on Monday? What time? What type of lead, what type of post is it? Oh, it's Motivational Monday. So I'm going to have a motivational quote. It's going to go out first thing in the morning because obviously we want to try and capture people during the day. Yep, that's what I'm talking about. Right? So document everything. Right? So when you go back to it and you're trying to analyze if it's worked or not, you go, actually, this is what I did. And now I've got obviously a clear picture of what I did and I've reminded myself because I've got it written down. Creates clarity. All right. So I'll leave you with that. If we move on, obviously the last 4 steps shouldn't take, they're not as in-depth as the business. I really wanted to give you a pretty good overview of that. Your movement stuff, still obviously plenty of tips and tricks, but we won't be quite as drawn out as that, I promise. Pre-screening. Once we have got our lead through the door, we obviously need to pre-screen them. We need to see how they move. How our clients move will have a huge, obviously, role to play regarding what type of training we do with them, how fast we progress, etc., etc. Generally speaking, this is done really poorly with clients. Even when I lecture at an RTO and we talk about pre-screening, I'll ask the clients, and we'll say a class of 25 to 30 students, all saying to become a PT. First question, how many of you have had a personal trainer? Half the hands go up. Okay, cool. How many of you that have had a personal trainer have had a pre-screening process done like the one I've just shown you, which will be obviously indicative of what I'm about to show you now? One maybe goes up. The rest of them, nothing. Maybe a push-up, maybe a a fitness test on a treadmill or a bike. Excuse me. But generally speaking, it's poor. One thing I've always said, how can you accurately write a movement program for a client if we don't exactly know what is going on with the musculoskeletal system? Simple as that. Right? Without knowing, you're just stabbing in the dark. Right? A good screening process tells you exactly what you expect from your client when you start asking them to perform. If balances and dysfunctions are not addressed, then we as exercise professionals are killing them kindly. Now that's obviously a bit blunt and a bit a bit dramatic, but in essence, we are doing them more of a disservice than a service if we do not account for the imbalance and dysfunctions that are present. If you've got a kyphotic client, right, and you have an even split between pushes and pulls, nothing will change. And they will continue right, down their path of poor posture and eventually get shoulder dysfunction and pain. And then potentially down the track, obviously going to have to go get it scoped or to get cleaned out because of the amount of scar tissue that's built up on the front of the glenohumeral joint, for example. And although I know a lot of clients, when you present this as a concept to them, a lot of PTs, understand that as a concept, but don't know how to do it. What does that exactly mean? And this is where obviously a Set 4 or diploma lets us down a bit because there isn't that carryover to the real world. So I want to address what types of assessments you need to know, more so than giving you a heap of tools to use, because it just falls outside the scope of this webinar. I want you to go, right, I need to know these tools, I need to know those tools, and you go away and you research and learn. So first one, range of movement assessment. So literally, how much abduction does the humerus have right, around the shoulder joint? Do you get 180 degrees or is it short? Right, that's what I mean down the bottom of that slide. Do you know the norms? The bottom one, I've got a picture here of a hip internal external rotation. What are the norms? The norm for that is between 40 and 50 degrees. What are you testing? What muscles are you testing? These are what I'm talking about. And obviously I've got some basic examples here. Thomas test, fantastic test, that one. Ankle dorsiflexion has a huge influence on a person's squat. Trunk rotation, obviously when we start talking about functional movement and rotation, we need to know what sort of a range they have. Activation tests. Does the glute med fire up? If the glute med doesn't fire up, I guarantee you there'll be some form of lumbopelvic dysfunction. Simple. Right? TA, that will obviously work in effect with that glute med. I guarantee you that if the glute med's not working and there's a lateral tilt through the hips, chances are the TA really struggles to hang on and do its job as well. Now obviously these are two. You've got many more. Rhomboids, lower traps, huge. okay? Dynamic movement assessments, these are the ones we obviously know reasonably well. So we know that we should be doing a squat test with a client, for example. How does our client squat? How is the thoracic function when my client does a push-up? And this poor lass here, obviously not great. Yeah. So these dynamic movement assessments are fantastic to know, right? And I generally say, as a common theme, less is more. Again, keep it simple. So I would rather you knew a push-up and an overhead squat inside out. And by inside out, I mean I know that poor thoracic dysfunction is, generally speaking, a cause from lower traps, rhomboids, infraspinatus, teres minor, not working, and of course neck flexors, and the overactive muscles are pec minor, pec major, subscap, parotid supraspinatus gets hung out to dry, upper traps is too tight, neck extensors don't work or are overactive. Right, that's unpacking. And now that's obviously for a push-up. A push-up is pretty primary, but of course then we can address the hips with that as well if we wanted to. Right, so I'd rather you knew a heap about a few tests than a little bit about a lot of tests. So for example, we could do an inline lunge, an overhead squat, a push-up test. Yeah, you see where I'm going with this? With a heap more, so you could probably do at least another 2 or 3 more that I know of the top of my head. But if you can't unpack them the way we just have with the push up there, then don't worry about it too much, because you're not going to get the right amount of information that you need out to really transfer into real results, rather than without having to stab in the dark. All right, now I've got here a basic template that I've got in my program. I've just taken a screenshot of it. Right, very small amount of information, but for your overhead squat, some of the basic points we might look at. So do the toes point outwards at any point? Do the knees collapse inwards? Knees, excessive forward trunk lean. And then of course I've got a nice big long list of potentially overactive, potentially underactive. So this is what I mean by unpacking. Right, again, the program will give you these skills. Now, and of course, once we've got a dynamic assessment, we've got a fair idea of what we can do as strength tests. And I wanted to talk to you about strength tests from a perspective, again, of dysfunction and imbalances. And the reason, because 90% of the clients we work with live a sedentary lifestyle, and as soon as you say sedentary, or they do in their health questionnaire, then you automatically just say dysfunctional. Poor kinesthetic awareness, coordination, wrong muscles are on stretch, wrong muscles are strong, etc., etc. So when it comes to a strength test, if my office worker says, oh man, I've been wanting to get strong for so long, I just need your guidance, I want to be able to do it, and you go, okay, well the obvious thing to do would be to test a baseline. Let's get some rep max strength. So let's go and do a deadlift, a bench press, a squat, so your powerlifting movements for an RM of some sort, so a 1, 3, 5, 8, potentially even a 10, right, to see where you're at. Okay, right, I'll talk about this in a second. Are they technically sound enough to do those lifts to a max effort? I would argue no. Most clients are not. They have barely learned how to squat properly, let alone putting a bar on their back and being able to load them to a max effort. Are those tests specific to their needs? Well, okay, in the example I gave you, you could probably argue that yes. Right? But the last point there, 95% of the time, all 3 of these questions cannot be answered by the common client. And by that I mean, those first 3 points, your client needs to be able to tick a green light or a yes to each of them. And for most of our clients, they can't. For most of our clients, having a double body weight deadlift is not a huge priority. Getting strong is, that huge amount of maximum effort strength is not. That might be something they're interested down the track once they've got a training age, but for now, it's not specific to their needs. and they can't cope with it anyway because of the dysfunctions. So, not that I would say don't do strength tests, but I would say modify your strength tests. So there I've got a single leg box squat. On the right side, I've got a single arm row, or even a scap retraction test. Now, of course, I appreciate with the single leg box that if our clients come in with 20 kilos, they're going to struggle to lift one leg up off the ground, right? Do a squat with one leg, sorry. So I appreciate that that's not specific to their needs either. However, working in a unilateral environment where possible, right, to measure a client's strength is far more functional and specific to their needs than bilateral and under great load. We can see what's happening from left to right. Right? We can see where the muscular imbalances lie. Because one leg, I guarantee you, is going to be stronger than the other. Same with one arm, the other side. One scap will sit, will retract and depress nicely. One will elevate and upwardly rotate through the scap. Guaranteed. So work within your unilateral environments. And the case I gave you before regarding a single leg squat and my client's too overweight, they can't deal with it, get creative. Raise the box up. Do a single leg press if you have to. Right? But preferably not. Force them to work through a bit of strength through stability, which I'll touch on soon. All right, so that's my final point on the pre-screening. Prehab obviously is a flow-on from what we've just talked about. Dysfunctional clients is pretty much guaranteed with 90% of the clients that walk through the door. We all have dysfunctions to some degree. I have dysfunctions, right? And we're always trying to iron them out. Now, the concept of prehab is the idea of being a policeman or an ambo at the top of the cliff to prevent an accident than being the ambulance at the bottom of the cliff that have to pick up the pieces. Right? So if you pick up dysfunction and imbalances and iron them out before they start to become a pain, or you start to get irritation around a joint, then that's a far better position to be in than having to go, oh, my client's got pain, I have to ship them off to a physio to deal with the fallout of that. Right. If we don't address the neuromuscular imbalances and dysfunctions that are presented in our clients, we're only doing them more harm than good. We've touched on that. Like my picture? Makes me laugh every time I say that. What elements make up good prehabilitation? All right, so let's go into that. Aha, the monkey, yes. The monkey on the back of every PT, anatomy and physiology. Yes, we skim over it in Cert 3, and we might do a little bit more of advanced anatomy physiology in Cert 4, but it's still nowhere near enough. And look, again, I get it. It's really hard when we day in, day out work with clients and we don't use the technical jargon. We don't say, just please sit back and retract and depress your scapula so the lower traps and rhomboids can do their job properly. Your client's not going to get that. So you lose a lot of context of what we're actually trying to do. However, we need to know it. We need to know, more importantly, not only the muscles, but the relationships that they have with the other muscles. It's more important. You have to know that when there's an anterior tilt, as I'm showing on the screen, right, hip flexors are dominant, pulls the hamstrings on stretch, pulls your lumbar spine into excessive lumbar curvature, and of course, the pain comes from the lower back. Right? They've got pain in the lower back, but where has the problem been caused? Well, chances are the hip flexors and the core strength is the actual root of the problem. Just as with the hamstrings, you might do initial assessment, you do a range of movement assessment with your client, and you try and pull the hamstrings up, put them on stretch, and you go, oh my God, your hamstrings are so tight. Well, yep, why? Well, it's not necessarily the hamstrings are tight, but more so that the hip flexors are pulling them into a poor position, for example. It's one of many, obviously. So it's a relationship. A muscle is not just a muscle. It obviously has a working relationship with fascia, tendons, ligaments, and other muscles. And it's starting to take a responsibility of learning these relationships, which will help you appreciate movement so much more. And it wasn't until I started analyzing it and learning the relationships that I got it, that I got human movement and understood what it means when we ask someone to move. Yes, we appreciate that functional training is more beneficial than an isolated model, bodybuilding aside. But why? What is it about a 3D wood chop? And when does the muscle start to work and why and what does it interact with? Okay. What dysfunctions and imbalances does a typical client present with? Now, that I've got up here is one of the typical relationships. Now, I use this slide. If you go to my website and download my Strength Through Stability presentation at a conference, I used this slide and the next one in it, and I quite liked it because it was a pretty rapid analysis of this gent I've got in front of the computer here, which is again a typical situation with the clients that we get. So it goes something like this: hamstrings are short, hip flexors are jammed, gluteals are underactive, lumbar erectors are overactive, abdominal muscles are underactive, shoulder internal rotators are over, scapular retractors are inactive, upper traps overactive, lower traps underactive. Now, of course, this is only just a snippet, but you know what? If you addressed each of these issues in your client and this guy here, right, successfully and effectively, I guarantee you would negate and correct 9% of the issues that he has on dysfunctions he has in the body, and his movement will go through the roof. So the stuff you'll be able to do with him will be 10 times more satisfying for you and for him, obviously. So again, just to summarize, for the key problems in the human body, if we as trainers learn half a dozen, so for this here, if we know half a dozen release techniques for our hamstrings and our hip flexors, and we know half a dozen activation exercises for our gluteals, all right, then we can resolve 80% of the common dysfunctions found in our common clients. Right? You will, for the most part, resolve their movement issues. Right? And this is, for a large portion, the basis of the argument between a fantastic trainer and an average trainer. It's what categorizes you between a thrash and bash PT, where the physios go, oh great, another PT that's broken a client. Well, let me go and fix them. And then I'll send him back to him and he's going to go back and do the same stuff again. And a trainer that takes responsibility for teaching a client from the ground up how to move. And yes, we all want to throw them really cool stuff and really challenge them with physical movement and whether it's in top end being muscle ups or levers or whatever it may be. But if the groundwork isn't done first, then I'm sorry, it's just not going to happen, or you're going to break them. And this is what I mean by break them. What happens when I sit for 8 hours a day and then I attempt this? It's just not going to happen. And it's not going to happen well. It might happen, but I guarantee you it won't happen in the same sort of form that this guy has. And when you can't hold form and you're doing a complex movement, that's when shit breaks. All right? So again, regress, progress, know how to do it. Know how to mobilize. These are the key critical skills that successful trainers know how to do. All right? And when I say break them, this is what I mean. It's not a matter of if, it's just a matter of when. They will be ticking time bombs. I've seen it time and time again. Client comes in, gets trained by a PT, right? Initially, first 6 months, no problem. and then all of a sudden niggling, all of a sudden shoulder pain, lower back pain. Well, it's because none of the common issues were addressed, and of course they've just gone and increased the level of dysfunction. They've strengthened the neuromuscular patterning that was faulty. All right, enough about that. Once our clients can move, we can ask them to perform. And of course, performance is going to vary differently from client to client, from individual to individual. Whether they play a sport, whether they are just a social runner, doesn't matter what it is. Now, for the common client, of course, because that's where we'll probably stay with us, our common client sees performance as, let's get a bit of strength, let's be able to hike a mountain, let's be able to keep up with our children, etc., etc. So from that perspective, the strength game, as I call it here with our clients, needs to revolve around what they need to be strong. So the environmental factors that they need to be strong for in their day-to-day life. And from that perspective, you cannot go past strength through stability. Right. So my point here, isolation, not just necessarily isolation, but also, I suppose, compound movements that are done in a stable environment. That's probably more to my point here. But I'll read you this to start with. Gaining strength around a joint without making the joint stable in the process is like strapping a V8 engine to a bicycle and expecting it to perform without braking. If you create a heap of power around a joint, i.e. let's use the example of our quadriceps and our hamstrings, and those two bad boys combined can generate a heap of force, and the knee and the ankle and the hip is not stable, you will break it. All right? And when we talk about an isolation model or getting our client to sit down, as soon as our client sits down, they're not working in an environment of stability or instability in this case. Their joints are not having to perform or neurally stimulate the nervous system so they stabilize the joint while you perform an exercise. So that when they go from a jog, because their friend invited them, through a track, so off-road, in an unstable environment, the likelihood of injury goes through the roof because nothing they've done has been in an environment of instability. Now, don't get me wrong, I appreciate that you cannot gain as much strength and hypertrophy in an unstable environment. That's a fact. However, again, we come back to the common client. The common client does not need to look like a rhino or move like a rhino, right? Which is obviously with zero range of movement. Right? They need to be able to be functional, they need to be strong, and they need to be able to work through a full range of movement. So in exercises that mimic that environment become critical. And you're going to watch an interview today or listen, sorry, because I haven't got the video of it, but you can listen to an interview from James, who's at the Queensland Academy of Sport, and he talks about strength from a runner's perspective. And everything he talks about that runners need is through a environmental perspective, from a strength perspective, when we talk about it. So a heap of posterior chain work done in an environment that represents some form of instability. And now, I'm not talking a BOSU ball and having to do everything on a wobble board. Now, I'm talking primarily through, again, we come back to unilateral movements. A unilateral movement creates that instability that we're after. Do more single arm pushes and pulls than double, because it forces the body to have to deal with a heap of force going through one side of the body and fix or stabilize the body to be able to perform that movement. All right. Yes, as I said, you negate a little bit of top end strength. You will not be able to come as strong as you possibly could if you did a bench press rather than a single arm push on a cable. However, the added benefits around improved coordination, stability, kinesthetic awareness, and core strength far outweighs that for our common client. Okay, so unilateral movements, fancy word for a single arm or single leg movement. Right? It obviously taps into this concept of strength through stability that I keep harping on about. Right? And all those things I mentioned before around neuromuscular imbalances, kinesthetic awareness, et cetera, as I've put there, are all major issues of common clients. Right. Our clients sit down for 8 hours a day. There's no need for them to come to the gym and sit down again. Here are some examples. Bulgarian split squats, Romanians. I've got a single arm row in a lunge position. And you could say that guy's doing a single arm snatch or even just like a high row into a press, something like that. Right? They're all within the functional training family, of course, which for a common client they need. Right? But there's that extra element of instability to it. Right? So they're getting strong through instability, so that stability around the joints become present. All right, so we're on the home stretch. We're into programming. Programming is obviously interesting because there's a couple of elements I'm talking about. One is exercise prescription, so which exercises you write down, which we've sort of already touched on, but then also periodization as well. So writing 6 exercises up for a particular program, let's look at that, and then does that fall into where our client has been, currently is, and is going. So good programming skills is the difference between an average client and an average client experience and a great one. And by that, I mean, do the exercises that you particularly, in an everyday program that you prescribe, cater for the exact needs of your client, the exact level of intensity, skill requirement, lifting ability of the client. The better you can prescribe movements that are highly tailored to where they are at this particular time, the better their experience. And the more confidence they gain in you, that you know that, or sorry, that they know that you can prescribe for any situation or any need that they have. And I'll elaborate more on this in a sec. So good programming, why is it so important? It defines the quality of your service. It gives clients confidence that you can safely prescribe exercises for any given situation. Good exercise prescription is a key contributor to having an excellent client retention rate. Right? So again, we come back to the retention. Right? If your client doesn't feel in any way that you are adapting the programs to their exact needs, they'll just have that little question mark, that little, the service could be a bit better. It's not bad, and I'm probably too lazy to go out and find another PT because it's Russian roulette. So I'm going to stay with them for a bit, but eventually they will get the shits. Poor exercise prescription is detrimental to your business, right, and industry credibility. Right? Members watch you, PTs watch you, right? Gym managers watch you. If you are not catering to their needs and you see, and your client is doing a terrible example of a push-up or a squat or whatever it may be, it reflects poorly on you, not them. Now, the biggest issue around that last point, of course, is regressions and progressions. More times than not, our PTs will know that the client isn't doing something right. However, they struggle with a good progression of the same primal movement patterns, right, to be able to safely progress them or regress them. Right? So, for example, a classic situation is not knowing a series of squats if your client can't do a bodyweight squat properly. And the key answer when I ask this question, what are you going to regress to if they can't do a bodyweight squat, is, oh, I'll do a ski squat against the wall. Okay, sure. You are working in the same primary movement pattern, but you're not moving. Right? There's a high, your feet out in front of the body, which has a high focus on quads, which is not what a client needs. A client needs to be able to sit through their heels, for example. Right? So, and as the movements become more complex, the harder it is to regress and progress, obviously, to create small stepping stones. However, it's critical for the success of not only them, but your business. Because the better you can regress and progress them, right, the quicker your clients are going to perform and see amazing results. But on top of that, the psychological effect it has on the client is huge, right? So rather than prescribing a movement that they're probably too slightly not ready for, and of course they fail at it, all it does to their psyche and their level of confidence going, oh, okay, you saying, okay, you're not really being able to perform that well, let's regress back to this one, is, yeah, I really sucked at that, that's unfortunate, let's go back. And there's that negative association to their experience. Whereas if you've got minute, tiny little stepping stones, and it doesn't matter how many of them you do, they're always moving upwards. Great, you've done that particular variation. Let's now try it with this. Great, you've done that. Let's try it with this. So they're always walking away from sessions going, oh wow, that was an amazing experience because I can see my progression. Last week I could only do this, now I can do this. And the following week they're going to be able to do that. See where I'm going with this. I've got there 300 plus exercises. So the interesting story about that, and again, I think you're going to read about this in the book. When I was young, when I was first starting out, I literally just said, right, well, let's see how many movements I know, put them on paper. Break them up, put them into your primal movement patterns, squat, lunge, bend, push, pull, gait, or you can break them up into your toys, dumbbells, barbells, balls, med balls, kettlebells, whatever you want. Right? My only rules I would put is no machines. I don't mind cables. You can put your cables or bungees in. Right? And write down as many as you can. How many variations? So you write down squat. Okay, squat press, front squat. What else do you know? Box squat. All right, okay, what about variations of a box squat? Box squat hanging onto a broomstick. Right, okay. So then write them down. And what I generally found when I did this as a youngster was anything over that sort of 300 mark of key exercises that you know, right, you generally had enough regressions and progressions or variations of key primal movements to be able to account for most clients' abilities at varying points. Now, obviously, the more experience we get, the more exercise we pick up. As a side note, the other cool thing about doing this little exercise is you start remembering exercises that you haven't done for ages. Go, oh, that's right, I remember that. I haven't done that in ages. Let's give that a go. Or you start bringing it into your cycling and programming because you obviously want to show some form of variation with what you do. That's pretty critical as well. Anyway, so that's exercise prescription. I wanted to finish with an overview of periodization. Now, of course, periodization is the concept of mapping out a program over a period of time or blocks of training, of course. So you've got your macro cycles, mesocycles, and micro to form an overview of the direction that your client is heading. Now, we don't normally do it, generally speaking. We'll work with from a 4-week basis. Okay, let's do a strength phase. Okay, let's now do a power phase. Let's go back into a hypertrophy phase without having a huge amount of direction around where our client's heading and why, which is a shame. It needs to happen, right? Again, it's another additional to your service, right? Another value add, right? But it's also important, just outright. If your client gets injured and you want to look back at what your client had done during that period to get them injured, right, you need to know where they've been. And if you don't document anything, how are you supposed to know? It's almost the equivalent of, we talked about the business or the profit section. Step number 7 is analytics and analyzing where you've been with your business, what's working, what's not. Well, this is periodization for your training. It's having an overview and acknowledgement of what you're doing, where you've been, so that you can modify and adjust where needed. Now, the picture I've got in front of you is the primary reason why most PTs don't bother about it. This is a American college, obviously a basketball player, and it's their overall periodization. Now, it's complex. It is detailed. We don't need this. And for that reason, right, we don't normally go here, because from the papers and what I've studied with periodization at uni and the likes of, most models come out like this. And you go, I can't see just how that relates to my client training 3 times a week. They don't need it. So what I've done for you is created that 5-stage fitness model. And it's just a very simplistic version of what you typically find in a periodization model, which can be applied to any client, whether they are semi-professional athletes or a weekend warrior that trains 3 times a week. I'm going to quickly rush through these for you right now so you get an idea of where I'm going with it. Strength through stability, we've already talked about this. So strength through stability pretty much represents your prehab. It's where you obviously fix neuromuscular imbalances, dysfunctions, and the likes of. It's where you will gain a base level of strength. So once imbalances are fixed, you would then look, of course, at, as I said, creating that base level of strength or base level of fitness if your client needs the fitness. Stage 2, performance programming, which means we just obviously touched on performance and what that represents for our clients. For the average Joe, that's pretty much just functional training. Now that our clients can move, we can ask them to do a squat press. We can ask them to do a lateral wood chop with a lunge, etc., etc. So where in stage 1 we had nice high training volumes and low intensity, we move into what is normally the case, a period of change where we go from a slightly higher intensity and we bring the volume down a little bit. Now, peak preparation represents a small block of training leading up to an event. If your client is going on a skiing holiday, then they would need a peak preparation phase leading up to that event. If they're going into a body transformation challenge that lasts 4 weeks, the intensity goes through the roof as they start to try and lean up a bit more. There's more greater focus on high intensity movements, metabolic training, etc., etc. Right, so the intensity there is extremely high and the volume has dropped off considerably. Number 4, performance comes first. We're looking at obviously a competition phase. So this would only be relevant for your clients that do play a sport. I've obviously put it in there because periodization has come from a sporting context. If you've got a client that plays a little bit of football for his local club down the local club down the road, then of course your priority here is that performance comes first. And by that I mean their game or their match. So our training that we do with them on a week-to-week basis will only complement what their needs are outside of the gym. Because during the season, winning the game is of top priority, goes without saying. So that, as a reflection of our training, becomes more high intensity, low volume. So short, sharp bursts. If you're working obviously in a strength environment, we're looking at power and or high-end strength, so maximum strength. You're not going to find hypertrophy phases in the middle of the season, for example. Longer rest periods. because you've got to appreciate that when they come into the gym, they're already fatigued. They're already not going to be anywhere near as energetic as what they were in the off season because of the rigors of playing week in, week out. And the final one is refresh. That obviously represents the concept that once they've finished the season or their build up, they've just going to run a half marathon or the Bridge to Brisbane, whatever it may be, that a period of refresh or a rest needs to coincide with that. And this is obviously not just physically, but mentally, especially if they've played a season. If they've gone and done 5 months competing and before that they had a long off season, they need some downtime. So they come back chomping at the bit, ready to go that following calendar year. All right, so in a nutshell, they're your 5 phases. And as an overview, I've got this for you. So of course, this is an example for a non-competitive client I just dragged out of my Accelerator program. And you'll notice there, all I've got is the initial 2 phases, strength through stability and performance, because this is a non-competitive client. So you are revolving around getting your biomechanics right to start, adding in basic fundamental functional movement stuff, and then you take them back to a base level of strength again. But of course, this time it'll be more advanced. So that could be, if we work off strength and stability 1 versus strength through stability 2, to put it in context for you, your corrective exercises is teaching them how to move properly. Then they go through a couple of phases where they are learning basic functional movements once they can do that. When they come back to strength through stability, rather than learning how to do a push-up, well, this time you might be doing push-ups on rings. Right? So there's an extra layer of complexity to the stability aspect of the training in this phase. So that's a classic example of how we build them up, break them down, build them up, break them down. Right? And they just keeps slowly compounding on itself. So by the time you get to the end of the year, their advanced functional movements are Olympic lifting movements, for example. Whereas here, we were teaching them how to do a squat press with a medicine ball. So that's an idea of a basic direction. Now, they might not be interested in Olympic lifting at the end of the year, but there's other types of training that we could give them. Maybe they do want some functional hypertrophy. So then we move away from, basic reps and set ranges and start giving them some godly supersets or trisets, and then splitting their program up. So, but as an overview, as a concept, that remains the same. Just obviously tailor the performance programs to whatever direction they want to go in. All right, guys, we're there. Obviously, as I've put there, I hope you liked what you saw. As far as my program goes, obviously, it's based around 9 critical subjects. If you go check out my website, you'll see them there. I don't want to take up more time than I have to here. But just a quick overview, 9 critical subjects, 200 videos, whether that's exercises or webinars and the likes of, weekly access to a Q&A session with myself, one-on-one feedback on tasks. So I'll be asking you to video yourself with particular movement patterns so I can give you some feedback on how that's going, running technique, Olympic lifts, you name it. The resources are huge. I've got more resources than you know what to do with. And of course, you've got a 52-week period, not just to finish the content, but to give you that support you're looking for over a period of time. Especially with your business, that's obviously quite helpful because you're going to get through the content with your subjects, and then it'll be like, okay, let's do this. Let's start formulating this into a product and a niche and actually roll out. And that's where that ongoing support is really good. Now, you might have noticed with the book launch today, we're obviously trying to give one away. I am pretty keen to do this. So a few things I'm going to ask for you. If you're keen to put your hand up to go into the draw, sign up for any of the free resources on my free resource or free products page on my website. like our page, which I think most of you would have done already anyway. That's cool. And then on the pinned post, give us 25 words, one of which P you think you need the most work in, which area, and why. If you could do those, that would be awesome, and we will definitely chuck you in the draw. So with that being said, I'm done here. So thank you very much for listening in. I hope you've got something out of it. As I said, it really was about painting an overview or an overview of direction. So it gives you some clarity about where you want to head, or what areas of what we do you should really think about focusing on, so that you can give yourself the best opportunity to succeed, and of course not become a PT exit statistic, which is extraordinarily high, as we know, the dropout rate for PT. Right, I'm signing off. Thanks guys, and I hope you enjoyed. Talk soon. Bye.